Right, okay, this next lesson is the last lesson in Unit 1 on Richard and John. Now, this lesson is focusing on the role of Jews in medieval England and the reason why there was a pogrom on them, which was an attack in the years 1189 to 90. So firstly, we need to look at why the Jewish people were important to England. Look at why the Christians turned on them in 1189. And by turning on them, it was a really brutal attack, which led to mass suicide and husbands actually killing their own wives so that Christians didn't hurt them. Now, this lesson, we need to have an understanding, because whenever we think of Jewish persecution, Jewish anger, people tend to think of the Holocaust straight away, but attacks on Jewish people have been happening for long before the Holocaust. So if we have a look at this, this is the last lesson in the Richard and John unit. So it says there, Jews in medieval England, legal status, roles in money lending, anti-Semitism, the cause and the extent of the pogroms, including the significance of the coronation of Richard I and royal exploitation via taxes. Now, in previous lessons, in the last lesson on revenue, I mentioned that Jewish people were individuals who had to pay a tallage to the king. The reason for this is because the king provided them with royal protection. We're going to understand today why exactly they did this. So, the first task that you need to do for this lesson. Why would Jews be important for England? Now, the Jews will be important for England because, I want you to use the statement below. Now, the information below is a speech by Richard I. It's just a small part of it. And I want you to write down why the Jews would be important for England. So Richard says, I make a lot of profit from the business activities of the Jews. When a Jew dies, all the people who owe me money still have to pay it back. The money that they owe and all the interest has to be paid into my treasury. Treasury is like the king's bank. This brings me in a lot of money every year. I can also raise money by taxing the Jews. I do not have to ask permission for this, as I promise protection for the Jews in return for their extra tallages. So this is a real quite easy task. Why were the Jews important for England based on the speech of Richard I? We'll go through it and then you can write the sentence. So first of all, he makes a lot of profit from the jobs that Jewish people do. Now, Jews weren't allowed to do many jobs in England. They were banned from most jobs. The main job that Jewish people did was money lending, which means they let people borrow money. They were like a bank in many respects. Now, the reason why this made the king a lot of money is because money lending made Jewish people very wealthy, because they could charge interest on their loans, okay, which was known as an usury. Jewish people were very, very wealthy. And it says there, when a Jew dies, all the people who owe me money still have to pay it back. So when a Jew died, all the money that Jew was collecting, the king still could collect it back. The money the people owe and the interest got paid into the treasury of the king. Now, if a Jew dies and they had lots of money outstanding, as I say, it went to the king. The only time it wouldn't is if a Jewish person left their money in a will to someone else. I also raised money by taxing the Jews. That's another reason why the Jews were important for England, because the king raised revenue by taxing them. He didn't ask their permission because he promised them protection. Now remember, if you were a Christian, how would you feel if your king was protecting a group of people who Christians actually saw in many lights as the enemy? Spend 2 minutes just finishing that sentence, pause the video, and then we'll go on to the next task. But this is just a real quick starter on why Jewish people would be important to England and the king. So the big question in this lesson is, explain why there were anti-Jewish pogroms in the years 1189 to 1190. Now this is a 12-mark question, and remember, 12 marks, 3 paragraphs. 12 marks, 3 lots of evidence explained if possible. We're going to delve into the content today and then consider what points we could make to answer this GCSE style question. Now, the first thing we need to understand is why the pogrom happened. Then we'll look at the events of the pogrom in a bit more detail. Remember, a pogrom is an attack. So what we're going to do, first subtask I want you to do is to go through this information and bullet point all the reasons why a pogrom happened against the Jews. And in subtask 2, answer the questions in full sentences. I will go through some of these bits as well with you to help you in a bit more detail. So first of all, the number of Jews in England began to grow in England from 1150. By 1200, there were 5,000 Jews in England, with the majority settling in large towns such as London, Lincoln, and York. So, this is going to be a reason why the pogroms occurred. Why? Might seem like a bit of a strange reason. Well, first of all, the Jewish people moved to wealthy areas, which means they became wealthy too. Christians would have disliked this. Now, what needs to be understood is that Christians tend to have a hatred towards the Jews because they see some Christians, a group of Christians, a minority, actually see the Jews as Christ killers, the people that were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. So there's that hatred there. The fact that Jews had started to move to England caused that hostility, that anger towards them to begin to bubble under the surface. Jews were allowed to live in England under the protection of the king. That would have made a lot of Christians very angry that their king was protecting the enemy. This meant that they didn't need to pay tolls and custom duties, and all inheritance they had was guaranteed. So the king basically meant Jews could sell stuff without having to pay tax for it. And all the inheritance they had, all money that their family left them, was guaranteed. They wouldn't be taxed on it, whereas Christians had to pay tolls and custom duties. So there was an element of jealousy here that the king was protecting them, but also not making them pay the same money that Christians paid. But the king could tax the Jews whenever he wanted, as they were classed as his property. Royalty took advantage of Jews through both Richard's and John's reign. For example, Jews paid £3,375 towards Richard's ransom in 1194, and John also charged Jewish people for their rights in 1201. And in 1210, John also demanded that all Jewish communities pay a tallage of £44,000. Okay, that's the equivalent of around 1 billion in today's money. So even though Jews were protected by the king, they were still expected to pay quite a large amount of money because of that protection. But why would this cause a pogrom? Jews were being treated differently to Christians, and Christians believed that Jews were getting sort of preferential treatment, positive treatment in comparison to themselves. The Jews' main job in England was money lending. Christians were not allowed to charge interest for lending money, known as an usury, but Jews were. So Jews were allowed to lend money and charge interest on top when people paid it back. So say, for example, I lent someone £1 and the interest on that loan would be 10%. It means when they pay me back, they have to pay me £1 and 10p. I'm making a profit on someone's money. Because the Jews could charge interest, it made them very wealthy. Their role in money lending was important to the economy as huge amounts of money were owed to them. For example, Aaron of Lincoln owed so much money that a separate counting house was set up to deal with his debts after his death. The king would benefit hugely if a Jewish moneylender died. So in 1194, a law was passed that registered all debts owed to the Jews. If a Jewish moneylender died without making a will, the king would collect the debts. So in 1194, the Jews had to register every loan, all the debts, all paperwork had to show what people owed. Because of this, if a Jew died without a will, the king could still collect the money, which caused a lot of problems for people who owed money in general. Now, on top of this, what needs to be understood is that at this time, England was a very anti-Semitic country, and it led to a lot of hatred towards the Jews. So anti-Semitic means this hatred and discrimination against Jews. Christians were angry that Jews could moneylend as it was seen as unchristian and allowed some Jews to become wealthy. Furthermore, Jews were accused of being Christ killers because according to the Bible, they condemned Jesus to die on the cross. The Jews were also blamed for Jerusalem being captured by Muslims, as they were rumoured to help the Muslims during the Battle of Hattin in 1187, which led to the fall of Jerusalem. That wasn't true, but because of propaganda, Christians hated the Jews even more because they thought that the Jews helped Muslims capture their holy land. The issues had been built up, so everything that I've discussed so far caused anger. It bubbled under the surface, and if people are feeling angry, what needs to be understood is eventually the anger will snap and it will lead people to attack. The trigger of the pogrom occurred on Richard's coronation, as the Jews of London decided to present Richard with a gift. But some people in the crowd, the Christians, thought that was an insult to the king. And this resulted in a massive riot against Jewish population that spread from London all the way up to the north of England. So, your job, pause this video and go through the information again and bullet point all the reasons why a pogrom happened against the Jews. Then consider, why were Jews important to the king? What could Jews do that Christians could not? When could the king not take a Jewish moneylender's money? What's another name for a counting house? What does anti-Semitism mean? And what event triggered the pogroms? Spend about 15 minutes doing this, and then we'll go on to the actual events of the pogroms in a little bit more detail. Now, before you do crack on with that task, I'm going to add something to this. Because what needs to be understood is that the Richard's coronation was a huge trigger for the attacks on the Jews. But there's a few other things that need to be considered. Christian people also believed that Jews murdered their children for ritual purposes. By their children, we mean Christian children. So some Christians believe that Jewish people killed their children, drank their blood for ritual purposes. So that, again, caused hatred, okay? And another reason why there was a lot of hatred was that a lot of the rich families in England were in debt to Jewish people. And some families believed that the best way to get rid of their debts was to get rid of the Jewish person who lent them the money. So that should add a few more reasons why this pogrom occurred. So again, just spend 15 minutes, pause the video, going through why the pogrom occurred, and then develop the questions in subtask 2. Right, okay, so let's move on. Just get rid of these annotations. We're going to look at the events of the pogrom. Now, the events of the pogrom, what you need to do for this task is to write this paragraph down with the correct words. So basically, a fill in the gaps activity. So, I'm going to read it. Your job, just pause the video for 5 minutes to write the paragraph down and fill in the words. Then I'll go through the answers. So after Richard's blank, slaughter spread across blank and the houses of Jews were blanked down. Richard was blank as the Jews were supposed to be under his blank and their blank was too. If the Jews were hit hard, so was Richard. A lot of Christians wanted to burn down houses to hide evidence of their blank that they owed to the Jews. Richard acted swiftly and had the leaders of the pogrom blank and sent orders to every blank that Jews were not to be treated badly. The violence continued across England over the next few blank, including in blank and King's Lynn, eventually arriving in blank. At York, Christians held Jews in York Castle, which led to men killing their wives and children and then them committing suicide. This was to stop Christians from hurting them and their families. Okay, so if you just pause the video now, and then we will go through the answers. Once you've done this, write the paragraph down and fill in the gaps. Right, okay, let's go through it. So I'm not going to write them in, just listen very carefully. After Richard's coronation, slaughter spread across England and the houses of Jews were burned down. Richard was furious, as the Jews were supposed to be under his protection and their money was too. If the Jews were hit hard, so was Richard. A lot of Christians wanted to burn down the houses to hide evidence of their debt that they owed to the Jews. Now remember, before I carry this on, in those days things weren't written down on computers, it would be on paper. So by burning the houses down and burning the evidence of their debt, they wouldn't have any more debt. Now, Richard would obviously be angry because the Jews were under his protection, but also, if a Jewish person was killed and the houses were being burned down, Richard couldn't claim that money. Richard acted swiftly and had the leaders of the pogrom arrested and sent orders to every shire that Jews were not to be treated badly. The violence continued across England. People ignored Richard. And over the next few years, including in Norwich and King's Lynn, eventually arriving in York. At York, Christians held Jews in York Castle, which led to the men killing their wives and children and then committing suicide. This was to stop Christians from hurting them and their families. So the events of the pogrom were really quite traumatizing. What we need to do for the last bit, okay, is we need to understand how to answer the Big 12 mark. And you don't have to answer this. And for this last part of the video, oh, totally gone off it. For the last part of the video, just watch, just understand, because that's more important at times than obviously getting every bit of information down. So remember, 12 mark is 3 paragraphs. So you'd write a paragraph on anti-Semitism, Richard's coronation, and also Crusades. So anti-Semitism, Jews were moneylenders and they were banned from many occupations. Christians weren't allowed to charge interest, but Jews were. Due to being moneylenders, many Jews were very wealthy. For example, Aaron of Lincoln was owed so much money that when he died, so Aaron of Lincoln was, when he died, he was owed so much by people that a separate counting house was set up to deal with the debts owed to him. There was a jealousy from the Christians, and a possible reason why the pogroms occurred. And English people owed so much money to these pogroms, to these Jews, that it led to pogroms. Rich families in England thought that actually the best way to get rid of their debts was to get rid of their creditor, the Jewish person. It meant that homes were burned down to remove the evidence. You can also link anti-Semitism. You can mention a few bits here about Christians thinking that Jews were Christ killers. So you can actually add that into this bit here. Okay, you can add that there. Jews were seen as Christ killers. It made the Christians more angry. It led to this resentment. Richard's coronation. England was incredibly anti-Semitic. When Richard was coronated, Jewish community gave Richard a gift. Christians thought this was an insult, which led to violence. 30 Jews losing their lives after the coronation, including at York, which I mentioned, where Jewish people committed suicide and killed their wives and children. For Christians to continue the violence, it was wrong. Maybe the pogroms occurred because the king showed he supported the Jews. So it may have made the Christians more angry. And also the Crusades. When people were asked to go on crusade, the propaganda said that it was Muslims and Jews that were causing the problems. And when Jerusalem was captured by Saladin, Saladin was the Muslim leader, Jews were blamed as well as the Muslims, which led to riots in East Anglia, Kings Lynn, Norwich, Stamford, Bury St Edmunds, Lincoln. Property was burned, people were killed, tortured. It was pretty horrendous. So this gives you a good understanding of how to answer this question. Why were Jewish people attacked in England in the years 1189 to 90? You've got now the majority here of the causes of the pogrom, significance of the coronation because of the gift, role in money lending, the fact that legally they were protection of the king. We're a very anti-Semitic country because of history. And also the fact I mentioned that there was a lot of royal exploitation via taxes. If the Jews were doing well, so was the King of England. So that's the overall lesson on why there were pogroms in England in the years 1189 to 1190.